Now I will request Dr. Ishrat Hussain to share his views. As member of the panelists, they have 7 minutes each, and then we'll go to Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Salman has made my task much easier because I'm not going to repeat most of the things he has highlighted. My basic submission is that we do not have a water crisis, but we have a crisis of governance and institutional failures in the water sector. And that is what is underlying all what Salman has been saying and what other speakers were telling us this morning. You have large conveyance losses, high operation cost, excessive water usage with inequitable distribution of water, deteriorating infrastructure, diminishing reservoir capacity, siltation of your dams. All these are actually arising because of the poor governance and institutional failures. You have 18 institutions, Ministry of Water, WAPTA, ISRA, irrigation departments, irrigation and development and drainage authorities, area water boards, water users association. So we have been talking about water policy. And if anybody comes from Mars and looks at our policies, they will say these are the state of the art. But they will go to the ground and they look at what is actually happening, they will be extremely disappointed. So the problem in Pakistan is not of strategizing or the policies, but the huge gap between implementation and the policy. In 1970s, I happened to be in the finance department of the government of Sindh. And we used to recover the entire operation and maintenance costs of our irrigation system from the Abiana or water user charges. We were not saving anything for capital costs. The capital costs were coming out of the development budget. Today, in Sindh government, only 10% of the operation and maintenance charges are being recovered for the operation and maintenance costs. There is a subsidy of 90%, which is being given to whom? To well-to-do and influential landlords who have also been given direct outlets from the main canals, which is against any policy laid down in Sindh irrigation department. They were tampering the modules at the head and depriving the tailenders, and the difference between the productivity of the head and the tail was 1 to 3. Imagine if you had an equitable distribution of water, what the productivity levels of average will go up, because the difference between the average and the tailenders is 40%. They only produce 40%. So you have a 60% gap arising out of this inequitable distribution of income. And that brings me to the tariff question. If you do not have a scarcity premium for the most scarce resource of yours, we all say it's a water-stressed country. What does it mean? It means that you should charge a scarcity premium. The influential landlords are flooding their fields with 3-4 times more water, and they're not paying anything. You switch to the volumetric measure and charge them the market price for that water they are using. And you will see most of your problems of the poor maintenance of the infrastructure, the conveyance losses, the question of inequitable distribution, all will be resolved. When I went to the World Bank in 1979, all the engineers and irrigation department of the World Bank were from WAPDA. WAPDA was considered one of the top institutions because it had completed one of the most significant Indus Basin water works with all the dams and the canals. Today we don't have the expertise in-house. And what has happened to WAPDA? General Muzammil is just a newcomer, but the graph of efficiency of WAPDA has really gone down. This institution should have produced the best irrigation engineers in the world, but it has failed to do so. That, to me, is the problem. My final point, because I have limited, that please do not look water in isolation of the political economy of the rural areas. The labor, land, and capital markets, which are highly rigid as compared to their urban counterparts. You have no land titles, so there is no land markets. The land markets are coercive in the sense that the people who are not really the most efficient producer takes over the land from their less well-to-do people who are indebted to them. So there is no real market. You look at the agriculture produce, all the procurement of wheat is done at the government price for the big and influential farmers. The poor farmers have to wait their turn when the market is raided by the private sector, and they come and then they buy it whatever the price may be. Third, the capital markets. I am very proud that I removed the interest rate ceiling on agriculture credit when I was at the State Bank, and it went up from 30 billion rupees to 300 billion, but still the main beneficiaries of agriculture credit from the banks and the formal institutions are the big and the medium size owners, not the small farmers. So unless you fix your rural factor markets and the rural output markets, I do not think water will make any difference. Finally, I would say that the demand pattern of agriculture is shifting from cereals to meat, poultry, and fishes. And meat requires more water than the cereal wheat. Therefore, your demand is going to change. You have a high middle class with urban population growing and migration taking place from the rural to the urban areas. The population demographics are changing, the climate change. Those factors are risks for water crisis, but not the institutional and governance structure. If you don't fix them, then you are bound to end up in a water crisis sooner than later. Thank you very much.